What's up? What's up? You're tuned in to another episode of Hustle Man Show. I got a special guest with me today. I've known this guy for quite a while. I've had a lot of people that I've met over the years. I'm gonna say this is one of the most interesting people that I've met. He goes by the name of Kev Decor. Okay, he's an artist, a content creator. He now lives in California, and I was speaking to him the other day. We were talking about just different content strategies and stuff, and it just bumped into my mind. I said, I gotta have him on the show. I gotta have an episode on his journey, what it is that he's done, and I want to introduce him. Kevin, you want to tell him a little bit about yourself?
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. So my name's Kev Decor from New Jersey, Atlantic County to be specific, Southern New Jersey. I've known Mohammed for a couple years now. Very, very solid individual.
I appreciate that, bro.
I'm a musician, an artist, multidisciplinary artist, I would say. Music being my main medium, video. I also write articles every now and then. And I'm an artist. So it's a pleasure to be here, man. Thank you for having me.
I appreciate that. Thank you for being on here. So some people say that they're an artist. I'm going to be honest. I've met a lot of people over the years, and they talk about their art, and I struggle to believe in the fact that they're an artist. From the first time that I met this cat, and let's keep it real, we've not always seen eye to eye on things. But from the first moment that I've met this guy, really shortly after that, I really became to understand that this guy really is an artist, true and true. And that creative eye really shines in a lot of the projects that you handle. So I want you to tell people a little bit more about what brought you into the music industry, when that decision was to go into it, right? When you're a creative, you're a creative. Let's keep it clear. That starts at a young age. But at what point do you go from like Kevin Adorno to Kev Decor? And when do you commit to the idea of becoming an artist? Like, at what age does that happen?
Sure. And it's not your bad, but it's Adorno. just to
Adorno,
clarify.
My bad.
Adorno.
Yeah.
It's all right. It's all good. 15 years old, my family moved from Ventnor City, which is right outside of Atlantic City, to Egg Harbor Township. And around that time, I didn't have anybody in my neighborhood because the neighborhood that I moved into was a development. And if you know anything about the South Jersey area, like if you lived there, around that time, it was like a boom, I would say, of a bunch of neighborhoods with like new developments, new neighborhoods and stuff like that. So I went from being living in inner city kind of life to kind of living in the sticks, in the woods. And I was just, bored out of my mind at a new high school, don't know anybody, no way of getting, to my friends. So it was around that time, and I had dabbled into music a little bit beforehand, but not in the way that I did eventually my freshman year of high school in this new town when, by chance, I found a beat making software that also allows you to record. And pretty much out of boredom, I started creating. And, I had been taking like band drumming in particular from 5th grade to 8th grade. So I kind of had that music bug in me, but I didn't really express it in the way that I was when I eventually started writing and putting like lyrics to like beats and stuff like that and making beats and all that. So 15 years old was when I decided like, this is what I want to do with my life. And then it took another 4 or 5 years before I realized like, okay, I'm like really, really about to do this, like with my life, I'm going to dedicate and commit my life to this no matter where it takes me, which was when I graduated high school.
So you're 15 years old and you know that this is what you want to do.
I just knew. And I don't know like what it was, about my own personality, but I just kind of always knew that was just going to be it, because you think about a 15-year-old, you don't know shit, you know, like you don't know anything. So, but I just kind of had this feeling that I didn't contest in my own mind that was like, yo, like, this is it. Like, this is what I'm gonna do.
So you're committed at 15. You know for a
Yeah,
fact this is what you're gonna do. So
I knew for a fact.
let me ask you this question. You said you got into band, you got into music. Did that all come naturally to you? You just picked up, you just understood music?
The funny thing is that like most people have musicians in their family, and they come from that kind of artistic, familial background. But for me, I didn't really have any family that was like into music. I didn't grow up around instruments. I didn't have anybody that kind of showed me the ropes. I remember in fourth grade was the first time that we had the option to choose an elective in middle school. Um, so it was like everybody decided whether they wanted to do, like, you had to take band, basically. It was a band and something else. But for band, you had to choose an instrument. And for whatever reason, I just gravitated toward the drums, and I decided, like, yeah, I want to be in band, you know?
Right.
So from there, it did come naturally because I excelled really fast. And amongst my classmates in band, there was only like 3 or 4 drummers, which I'm still friends with those people to this day. But I got pretty damn good, like really fast. And then I kind of became the main like jazz band drummer, like playing the drum set, and you know, and that, yeah, just it kind of came to me naturally. But music, like as far as like writing and recording and all that, in eighth grade, me and my friends made like a mixtape dissing all the Margate kids, because we had this big beef, Ventnor and Margate. And
You
I
trying to
don't know
start a rap?
how, but
You
I
trying to
figured
start a
out I
rap
could
battle?
record vocals. I never talked about this before. So like, I don't know how, but somehow I figured out that using Windows Movie Maker,
Right.
you could record audio through the computer microphone and lay it over 2 tracks. So I would record my vocals and then have like a beat that I would download off of like Kazaa. I don't know if you remember
Yeah,
Kazaa,
yeah, yeah.
and like Wares and all those programs. So that's when I discovered what an instrumental was. And I found those instrumentals. So me and my boys, we made a bunch of like diss tracks over some G Unit beats and shit. And that was like, it was fun, but it wasn't like the feeling I had, when I was a freshman. And I was like, yo, like it felt more like an outlet at that time. When I jumped into it freshman year, it was like it was just pure. It was like, it felt therapeutic to me.
That's dope. So this is
Yeah.
something you just put your heart into it. It's really
Yeah, I
you
really
knew.
did, man. And I still have um boxes, like shoe boxes, of all the sheets, all the notebooks, stacks of notebooks. I used to write every day, like every single day
That's
in
dope.
school. Yeah, everything.
Finding yourself at a young age like that, man. That doesn't normally. I didn't know who I was at 15.
Yeah, and
That's
you
a
know what?
reality.
Something that I realized is that I was really blessed, man. Because to know that young, that early, like what you gravitate to is rare.
Right.
Like you said, and I realized that because all of my friends in high school, they didn't know like what they wanted to do in college. They had no idea like what their like it thing was. And for me, I didn't know where it was going to take me, and I had big ambitions, of course, but I just knew, yo, regardless if this shit ever works or not, this is the only thing I could see myself doing.
So you're 15 years old. You go into high school. You've committed
Yeah.
yourself mentally.
Yeah.
Most people are not committing themselves to anything mentally at that age. They're absorbing what their friends, their family, whoever around them is saying that they should be doing with their life, and they're making a shallow decision based on that. Right? That's what I
Yeah.
normally see because I deal with a lot of different age groups in terms of hiring and stuff. They don't really know what they
Sure.
want to do, but they've maybe sometimes committed to something which they're not really sure of. But you're
Yeah.
wholeheartedly into this. You know you're going to do this. You move on. So you go from
Yeah.
15, right? Take me through going from high school to trying to follow through on this thing that you've
Yeah.
wholeheartedly committed on. So what's next after high school?
So I don't know if you've ever experienced this in your own life, but and I don't know if you're familiar with Carl Jung. He's a psychologist, one of the leading figures in psychology, considered one of the fathers of psychology. He talks about the circumambulation, which is basically a cycle or a pattern that occurs in everybody's life. that is like the repeated hurdle that people, it's like that thing that you have to overcome in your life that keeps showing up, you know, in one form or another. And it's unique to every specific person. So for me, I didn't realize this at the time, of course, but in hindsight, you know, looking back now, I realized that what occurred to me with my musical passion later would reveal itself to be the circumambulation of my own life, which is that I didn't fit in with everybody else. And so I kind of had to, you know, like I really wanted to, when I got to Egg Harbor Township, it was a very like creative arts kind of community. And like in the school, if you weren't a dancer, you were a singer or you were a rapper or like you were part of some crew, some clique, like it was very like artistic, right? So when I got there, of course, new kid in a new town, no friends, no neighbors, you know what I'm saying? So I wanted to fit in and like figure out like what crew I could kind of like get in with or what friends I could make. And I loved how everybody was into something. So I really tried to like connect with people on a musical level. But of course, A, I was ass at that time. And B, I just, for whatever reason, man, I couldn't like fit in with anybody. So I really, throughout my high school years, I really learned how to kind of keep my head down and focus on myself and just kind of be in my own little world. And then later on, I realized that that was going to be the pattern throughout my entire musical journey up until now, as we speak, still.
Focusing on you.
And focusing on you, not trying to be a part of what's going on if you don't fit in. And that's where my biggest triumphs came from.
That's dope.
So,
So where do you go from high school? What's
so
next?
from high school, freshman year, I was ass. You know, I was terrible. I thought I was great though. And then like freshman year to sophomore year, I got a little bit better. Sophomore year to junior year, I got a little bit better. And then junior year to senior year was when like people that I kept showing my music to started to be like, yo, like, okay, like this is kind of, you starting to like get something going, you know? So, um, so then it's so funny because it's going to seem so minuscule to like everybody else. But at the time it was a big fucking deal. There was this guy who was part of this like pretty well-known local rap group who basically, you know, thought he was being funny, like, you know, kind of challenged me to like a battle. So he went home, recorded a diss track. I went home, recorded a diss track. Of course, I was the unknown kind of underdog or whatever. I would just always be in the back of the class writing. Nobody really knew like what I was up to, but I dropped my diss track on MySpace Music. He dropped his, and like the whole fucking, like all my people went crazy. And I kind of became known kind of like as a battle rapper because I also did a bunch of cafeteria rap battles, and I really like surprised a lot of people, you know, that kind of didn't know like what I was up to. So I kind of like started to feel like very confident about like my abilities because I went from like being relatively um, not liked and unknown amongst my peers to like kind of being respected in that small community. And that all resulted from me like stop, you know, like eventually deciding to stop trying to fit in and get along with the people that I wanted to do things with and instead focused on my craft and just wrote like every day. You know what I mean? So that was kind of like high school in a nutshell. Once high school was over, everybody's rushing off to college and everybody's like unsure, but you know, obviously the usual pressure that people feel from parents and stuff like that, everybody decides to go to college. But me, I decided to hang back and really think about what I wanted to do because I knew for a fact anything academic was not going to be my path.
Right.
If it didn't have anything to do with music or creativity in any kind of way, it wasn't going to be for me. So I didn't go to college when everybody went to college. Instead, I kept working on music. So a couple, I would say like 9, 10 months into that year after high school, after graduating, my boy hits me up. He's like, yo, I don't know if you know, but they have schools for like audio engineering and music specifically for that.
Right.
And I was like, really? I don't know why, but I was so late to the idea that I could actually go to school for music and like do something with it. You know what I mean? So when he sent me this, I literally Googled it. I found the school. It was called the Institute of Audio Research. It was in New York City, in Manhattan. And right away, instantly, I was like, this is it right here.
You're hooked.
Um,
You're
and
ready to
then
go.
and then my boy, my best friend, he told me about this other school called Full Sail, which was basically like the same thing, but it was like way more like bougie. It was like way more like, they had a campus, it was crazy. But IAR, short for Institute of Audio Research in New York City, was like more like small, more like gritty, but actually they were one of the first audio schools in the world. So, and their tuition was way cheaper. So,
Wait, hold on one second. What's tuition for a school like that a year?
so Institute of Audio Research was 16K.
A year.
Yeah, and Full Sail was like 67,
Crazy.
and increasing every year.
Crazy. And how many years are you going to the school? AAR.
IAR was
IAR.
1 year. Yeah, 1 year. Full Sail, you could go, I think for 1 year, they had a 1 year program, but you could go for 2 years and get a bachelor's also.
Right.
At the time, I was like, it just, because of the money, it didn't make sense to me.
So is this school, real quick, is this school an accredited school? Are you walking away with some kind of degree in audio engineering?
So IAR, you don't walk away with a degree, but you walk away with a legitimate engineering and music production certificate. So basically, you can go work at any major record label or recording studio that's owned by a record label. The biggest studios in the world. You can go and show up, and if you have that, they consider that something that's legitimate.
Sure.
And academic. But the whole idea of it is that it's kind of like a trade school. So if you want to be a chef, I'm sure you can go to a vocational school and stuff like that and get that going. But so yeah, and then I like that aspect of it too, that it was like, wow, I can go for a year, get all the training I need, and either go work somewhere, close to this, or just use that knowledge for myself, for my own craft. And so the whole purpose of it for me, though, was I'm going to go here to learn how to do what I need to do for my own music, not because I want to work for somebody else as an engineer. You know what I mean? So, long story short, we go. My mom, this was like a big moment. So I've had two major moments in my life and in my career that I felt like were like ain't no way in the fucking world this can happen unless it was meant to happen. You know what I mean? So we went to see the school, look for apartments and stuff like that. Went with my best friends. They were going to come with me too. And basically, there was no way my mom was going to get approved for like the loan to pay the tuition. So we're sitting there with like the school, I forget what they call them, the people that are in charge of like onboarding you. So we're sitting there with him, and he's like, okay, so we're gonna do a credit check. And because it wasn't like a big school, there was no FAFSA, there was no like aid, you know what I mean? So It was like, you got to get a credit line or nothing, right? So my mom told me, she was like, oh man, like, I don't think I'm gonna get approved for this. She didn't know that there was no like government aid or anything like that. So, and I didn't either. So we're sitting there with the guy, and she's like, I could tell she's like heartbroken because she really wanted to do this for me. But the guy was like, you know what? We should just try it because you never know. So he runs her credit. She somehow, some way gets approved. And I was like, damn, like it was just like an all or nothing moment. And the reason why I consider it to be such a life-changing moment was because had she not gotten approved, I wouldn't have gone. And that moment was so monumental to my development that I don't know, like what I would have been on a completely different path. Maybe I would have been in the same place, maybe further. I don't know, but it was just so big for me at the time, looking back. So she got approved, and tuition was 16K. So now I'm getting ready to go to the school. So So I moved to New York. Well, first of all, rewind. Had no apartment, had no place to live. And like school starts on a Monday and it's a Friday, right? So I end up deciding like, yo, I'm gonna have to drive to New York and back every day. I don't know for how long, but until I find a place to stay at.
Wait,
So
hold on. Let me just stop you right there. So you go to New York, you don't have a place to stay, but you just barely get the economics right. Your mom gets approved for this loan. You barely get in, but then you decide you're gonna commute back and forth. For reference, that way people understand. What kind of commute would that have been for you, back and forth every day?
So that's 2.5 hours one way.
Okay,
So that's
so it's a
5
5 hour
hours.
commute.
Yeah, 5 hour commute
And,
a day.
and the reason why you wanted to do this is you didn't have any money to get an apartment. You're like
So I
you're
didn't have any
18,
money
19
to
at the time.
afford. Yeah, I didn't have any money to get an apartment. And I was trying to find something affordable, but at that time, and I'm sure right now too, the market was crazy for
Yeah.
apartments. So like, unless you were getting something like in fucking Harlem,
Right.
like in a fucking project building,
Right.
like you weren't gonna find anything like decent, right? So I decided like I gotta do this shit, I gotta do what I gotta do. So without knowing how long this was gonna last, I started driving up and driving back. And that shit was crazy. I would get up
For how
at,
long?
so I did it for I think a week and a half. And then suddenly out of nowhere, a coworker of my mom's at the casino tells her that his wife's sister has a spare room in her apartment that she's renting out in the Bronx, South Bronx. So of course, it was a little expensive, but it did the job, right? So
Sure.
got the room. This is my first time, even though it was only 2.5 hours away. You got to understand, at this time, I think I'm 19 or 20, and I've never been, away from home like that. And we're talking about the Bronx, right? So like, this was not fucking,
Sure.
it was not a walk in the park type of place, right?
Sure.
So I get there, move in, and yeah, I'm on my own basically. Like this very old lady, and I'm so grateful for her to this day. I should call her, see how she's doing. Maria, it was just her, and like the other room wasn't rented, so it was just me and her. But basically, she lived her own life. She was barely there, and I'm just like, this is it. I'm out here, right? So basically, man, that was tough for me, man. That was tough, and I really learned, the difference between real friends and acquaintances at that time period. That was one of those life lessons too, because my phone was so fucking dry, bro. Like I remember, like the first or the second night, like I got emotional, man, because I just felt like, yo, like I'm out here by my fucking self. Like it was just crazy. And yeah, man. And then every day I would commute to school, like 40 minutes, 45 minutes. So I would take the 4 train from South Bronx, 176th Street to be specific, down to Manhattan. And I would take it back. And then as soon as I got home from school, I would work on music, like apply all the shit that I learned. And I did that for a couple months. And yeah, and then eventually I had this experience that created a fork in the road for me. And at the end of my program, so first of all, the program was great. I met a lot of people, made a lot of connections, a lot of people that I still kind of stay in touch with every now and then to this day. I'm so grateful for that time period because it really taught me a lot about myself. It taught me a lot about my craft. It gave me the tools to continue to build on my tools and my craft for the next 7 years, based off of that knowledge. And I was like the guy that sat in the front of the class. Like I wasn't trying to talk to nobody. Like I was there I was on a mission. But I learned so much. And yeah, I'm just so grateful for that time period. It really taught me a lot. It was hard, but it was great. It was what I needed. And at the end of that program, my apartment had a bed bug situation, which was embarrassing. And bro, like I was like, it was crazy to me. It was just so crazy. And like the building that I lived in was like a hood ass building. Like it was a project building, you know? And I don't know, I
Shout out
guess it
to the
was bound
Bronx.
to,
Shout out to the Bronx.
for real, man. It was like, it was crazy, man. But that shit shook me up a little bit because I didn't have any money to like get anything exterminated. Like it was just like, it was rough. And at that moment I decided like, you know what? I'm either going to stay here and work at a studio, which is what I don't want to do ultimately, or I'm going to go home and build something. And so I made that hard decision and I went home. I finished my program. I graduated, was like, you know, one of the top in my class. And yeah, then I came home and I got right to work with saving up some money and building a studio in my mom's basement.
So
And
who finances that?
so I was working at Starbucks in New York City, right? I was a shift supervisor there. I transferred to a Starbucks in Atlantic City. So as soon as I got home, I was working in Starbucks. I literally saved up every fucking paycheck for like, I'm gonna say months, but it was like 3 months. And then my mom knew somebody who knew somebody that was kind of like they would lend money, you know what I mean? So
Sure.
not my mom, let me take that back. Somebody knew somebody that, you know, they lent money and stuff like that. And it was, you know, friend of the family type of thing. So I ended up borrowing a couple $1,000s, combined that with my paychecks, and that together went all the way in and built this studio. And when I say like, you know, and you know, I also had my best friends, which also ended up being my musical partners. We started a label together called Local Music Group. Shout out Michael Luna and Lunatic. You know, we together, you know, we chipped in, you know, here and there, you know, we painted this shit. Like we really like built this shit, you know? So we hired a contractor for dirt cheap. They built the framework and everything that I designed. And I applied the knowledge that I learned from my studio building class at school in New York City, to like build this thing to like, you know, industry standard. It was in my mom's basement, but this shit was like industry standard, you know, as industry standard as you can get it with the amount of money that we put into it, which was, you know, a good amount of money.
How much money does it cost to build a studio that you would consider a good studio to work out of?
Back then, between 15 and 20, you know, if you're like on a shoestring type of budget.
Yeah.
Back then, but now under 10K easy.
Because the equipment is different. It's a whole different game.
Yeah, it's a whole different game now.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm rocking like under 10K right now in my apartment, and I'm getting, you know,
Great
industry
quality.
standard. Yeah, so that also has to do a little bit about, you know, what you're able to do too. But yeah, so built this studio. This is 2011, just to paint the picture, right? So I went to audio school in 2010. I graduated in 2009 from high school. And then I graduated from the audio program at the end of 2010. So 2011, I get home. And from 2011 to the end of 2011, we bang out the studio between saving up, getting the money, building it, design, everything. And then 2012 was when like we really kicked things off. So 2012, I start operating the studio basically as like a business. So, you know, I started recording all the local artists, and I started like, I just went ham on trying to like capitalize on the studio and create a community, actually, you know, a community with all the artists in the area, because at that time, nobody was really offering any industry quality studio services and equipment. The biggest name in South Jersey at the time, and probably still, was Ronnie Jerkins. And so if you've never seen the inside of Ronnie Jerkins' studio, which I haven't, I mean, you got to build your own shit. So that was my whole approach.
Where was his studio? Was it in Northfield?
Egg Harbor Township.
Egg Harbor Township.
Yeah.
So real quick, your mom, she takes out that loan, right? I think we just kind of hovered over that.
Yeah.
Parents that are supportive, right?
That was everything.
I mean, that doesn't automatically happen, right?
Nah.
Not all parents are supportive, and not all parents are supportive of that kind of craft, right? Because that's a very specific craft, and there's a lot of risk involved. So some parents, the music industry is a tough industry. Based on my limited knowledge, I kind of hover over it. There's a lot there. It's not an industry. It's not an easy industry to get involved in. So not many parents are going to be quick to say, you know what, I support your decision. I'm going to help finance it. So talk a little bit about that in terms of how supportive your mom was.
Yeah. So my beginnings with all of this from day one, I remember my mom got me my first computer when I was like, I must have been like, I don't know, like 15 or something like that. Right. Maybe like 13. My mom got me my first computer. And at that time was when computers were starting to get a little bit more affordable. So you had like the 256 megabyte, HP or Gateway type of thing, you know what I mean? That you can get from like Sam's Club. So, and so my mom is from Dominican Republic. She's very old school. A lot of Dominicans are very old school. That's just part of the culture. And so buying a computer was a big no, right? But her friend convinced her. And I remember she had somebody like my cousin's friend who was like into computers come by and like install parental control and all this stuff. It was just funny. But so that was the computer that kind of like initially I found a way through Windows Movie Maker to kind of start recording shit. But fast forward, freshman year, when I got that beat program, I basically took my mom's debit card without her knowing and ordered the software. It was like $20. It was a CD-ROM for a computer program. And I saw it as a MySpace ad, which is crazy just to think about, like, damn, fucking marketing. But anyway, or advertising. So
yeah.
I got this program called Hip Hop EJ4. It was the 4th version. I got it, without my mom really knowing, because at that time it was like fucking sacrilege to order anything off the internet with a fucking credit card or a debit card.
Right.
So, if you have immigrant parents, like the internet was such a weird, like unknown thing.
It was very suspect.
Super suspect.
It was very suspect for a long time, and we take it for granted right now. You Amazon everything. You're buying stuff online regularly, but that wasn't always the case, bro. Like a few years back, that was not the case. And also, that's not the case overseas, right? That infrastructure that exists right now for fulfillment of orders.
Oh, hell no.
Man, it's crazy to me. Like Amazon could never be built in an environment where that infrastructure doesn't exist. They're leveraging all of that infrastructure. When you get an opportunity, there's a video on YouTube of Jeff Bezos, talking about he makes an analogy with the way that the electric grid system developed and allowed for like appliances and television and radio. Okay. He makes that analogy with Amazon.
Wow.
Right. So
that's
like,
deep.
No, it's very deep. So for example, like there would never be an Amazon if there was no USPS, if there was no roads, right?
Yeah.
If there was no UPS, no FedEx, no like infrastructure. They actually stood on the shoulders of years and years of development, right? We have like social and political, some sort at this point, you would say of there's stability and safety in this country.
Yeah.
90% of packages in other countries are getting robbed. Let's keep it 100. Here, that's not the case. When you get a package from Amazon, you're gonna get your pack. I mean, they do get it happens.
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah, but not on the bro.
Not like
no, they would never be able to build a multi-billion dollar. Did you hear the stat on Bezos? He just throughout the pandemic, I think his net worth went up a few $1 billion. Like not like $1 billion, like a few billion. I don't have the exact number, so I don't want to misquote it. But his net worth goes up a few $1 billion during the pandemic. You're talking about infrastructure. This is a first world infrastructure. If your family's from the Dominican Republic, if your family's from Morocco, if your family's from Mexico, if your family's from all these third world, I guess they would call it third world nations or second world nations, you don't have the luxury of that infrastructure.
Absolutely not.
Right?
Yeah.
And also one other thing I just want to tell you, the luxury of studying music, that is a luxury of the first world.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
So think about what hierarchy of needs have to be filled in order for you to say something as audacious as I want to study music and art.
Yeah. Even 100 years ago, you couldn't pursue writing even as an author,
Absolutely.
like as a profession. That was not something that was even an option. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Very, very fortunate.
Yeah.
Very fortunate.
So you go.
I only got the software because it was so like cheap, right?
Yeah.
That I don't think that if it popped up on my mom's radar, like her bank account or whatever, I don't know what the fuck I was thinking, but I was just like, I'm gonna just order this, right? So I did. And eventually she found out about it and it was cool, everything was fine. But that software was quintessential to everything else because that was like the building blocks.
So this was a $20 software.
$20 CD-ROM.
What did that software?
Hip-hop EJ4.
Yeah, what was that software? Why was that software so important? Like, what was it?
Anybody could look this up on Google or probably even YouTube. I've looked it up before. I found the cover and everything, and there's like screenshots of it. So basically, it was a software that allowed you. It had a loop library within the software of like different drum loops, different melody loops, different like sound effects. And you could just drag these loops into a grid and like Legos, but with audio, make something.
Wow.
You know what I mean? And then they had the ability to where if you had a microphone on your computer or you got a microphone from Radio Shack because they didn't have internal microphones back then. So I got an $8 microphone from Radio Shack, plugged it in, and I was able to record vocals through basically like a webcam mic for a while into that program and export it as one song.
Yeah. So
at that time, we had the iPods, I had this like busted ass iPod that I got for super cheap. But I would export it, make my songs, export it, show it to my people at school. People would kind of be like, and then over time it got better and better. But so that was like the early stages.
Real quick, you kind of hovered over this point, but I'm still trying to digest.
Oh yeah, yeah.
No. That you leave New York to come down to South Jersey, right?
Yeah.
So New York at the time, bro, if you're talking about early 2000, like 2010, 2011, that's when, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What was the music scene like over there at that time?
Man, rich. It was definitely rich.
So then the next question to that is, if it's a rich music scene, why do you decide to come back to South Jersey? Because South Jersey is not really the mecca of music at that point, right? You would think that if I want to be an artist, right, like I would go to California, like you ended up doing, or I would go to New York because that's where music is popping. So what makes you say like, you know what, this is the richest music scene on the East Coast? It's probably there in like Florida at the time, right? It's popping, Florida, Atlanta.
Miami. Yeah. Atlanta, I don't think was in the conference. I didn't even know Atlanta was a place until later, like 2015 and stuff like that. But
why did you decide to leave if it was such a rich area for music?
Because traditionally at that time, that period in time in music, the frame of thought, when it came to like the path that one would take, wasn't in alignment with what I knew I wanted to do. So the path was go to audio school. And within the school, they had programs that helped you land internships at all the major recording studios. That was the only thing that they promised you, that they would like go hard on trying to get done for you once you completed
place you in an internship.
Yeah, place you in an internship.
Did you do that or no?
No. So that was the fork. I was like, and it was just common practice and knowledge at the time that when you go to intern at a studio, you're grabbing coffee, sweeping floors, cleaning bathrooms for like 4 years minimum.
Right.
Minimum, before you even get to be an assistant. And then once you're an assistant, you got to put 5 years in minimum. And then on the off chance that that guy that's the head engineer gets sick and like you're the only person that can record, you know, fucking Nelly or Ja Rule or something, and like he loves you for some reason.
Yeah.
That was like the only way. And that was just like such a concrete way of thinking at that time that I was like, that's definitely not what I want to do at all. And I don't know why, but I've always been very aware, like hyper aware of time. So in high school, I would go to ShopRite and I would be like, yo, why are like 50 and 60-year-olds working at ShopRite? You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to party now, work hard later. I want to work hard now and relax later. So I don't know why, I've always thought about it like that. So I was like, I don't want to put 5 years into something that I don't want to do and then decide that it's not for me.
Right.
So I'd rather take this risk right now, but have it be a trajectory that is in favor of what I want to do with my life, you know? So I saw New Jersey as a gap that could be filled. And I felt like I could fill that gap.
You thought there was nobody in Jersey providing music service, a place where creators can come in order to create their content, their music specifically.
Yeah.
Because you were not on video and photography or anything like that. You were just specifically on music, and you thought that you would knock out two birds with one stone. I'm gonna build this studio. I'm gonna leverage this studio for myself, and I'm gonna fill the gaps with other artists. So you want to turn it into a business.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
And basically in New York, my recording situation was like none. I still have a picture of me with like my studio set up in New York. I post it every now and then as a reminder. Like 2010, I had a bed mattress, the one that I would sleep on. I would post it up against the wall with the fucking covers and everything on it still. Hang all my clothes in my closet up on the frame that's under the mattress on the side, just to create kind of like a vocal booth. You know what I mean? So, but it was, I mean, when you live in an apartment building in the Bronx, bro, like the noise does not stop all night long, all day long. So I had this like hurdle of trying to record good quality audio that was not being met either. So if I stayed in New York, worked my ass off and interned to work towards something that I didn't want to ultimately do and didn't have a place to record, I was like, man, I'm losing big time. But if I go to Jersey, all my basic needs are met because I would be able to utilize the space at my mom's house. So I wouldn't have to worry about rent. I could build a business and I could have a place to do my craft, you know, in peace. And I feel like, you know, sometimes I'll have a moment where I reflect and I'm like, damn, what would life be like if I stayed in New York?
Right.
And I go back and I say, there's only been 2 times when I've had these like super big moments in my life that I think about. So New York was one of them. And it was that moment of me deciding to come back to Jersey. Because had I stayed in New York, my life would no doubt be different.
So if you turn back the clock, would you have stayed in New York?
I think about that all the time, but nah, I would have made the same decision because I feel like it was the right decision to make because of where it's gotten me in relation to what my goal has always been, my dream.
I got you.
You know.
So,
my dream.
You had a different trajectory. If you would have stayed in New York, you would have become an engineer. You would have been an intern, and the grind would have been a very, very long grind for you to do something that you didn't want to do, anyways.
Yeah, and for some reason, I was just tapped into my inner guide in that way that I just knew like that just wasn't going to be a happy path for me. Even if it was close to music, it wouldn't be in the music the way I wanted to be in it.
So you come back to Jersey, you build the studio, you borrow money, you scrape it together.
I borrow money.
Y'all painting walls, building stuff on your own, buying equipment that is hard to afford because you're young. You know, you don't have a rich uncle that's just handing you cash and saying go do what you want. So take me through the next few years before you decide I'm going where the action is.
You know, before I jump into that, 2 things. Like at that time, I felt like the universe was like really like, yo, like this is you right now, because it just so happened that some of the gear that I needed, like the way that things came about, man, was so crazy. Like this guy was liquidating his studio in North Jersey at the time when I was looking for a microphone and a preamp, and the microphone was $4,000 retail price, and the preamp was like 225, like 2,200, and so I definitely did not have like 6K to put up, for that. But this guy sold me the mic and the preamp for like 2,300 off of Craigslist, brand new, bro. I still got that microphone. Still got that microphone. It's my baby. Like I still use it. It's on every recording that is online. Period.
What is
Well,
that? What is
up
that
until
quote?
recently,
What is that quote in
it's
The
a.
Alchemist? What does it say?
Oh yeah, the universe conspires.
The universe conspires. When you
Yeah, the
dream,
universe conspires.
when you dream, or
Yeah,
when you want something bad enough, the universe conspires to bring it to you.
and I really learned something because at that time, when I was working at Starbucks, I was saving up every check. It was like $500 checks, just piling them on top of each other, piling. But it still wouldn't have been enough to get everything done. But somehow, some way, like everything just kind of like I was so focused on this shit, bro. Like everything just kind of morphed into being in the right situation to accomplish that. And so that was a huge lesson for me. And this is way before I read The Alchemist, but it was a huge lesson for me that like when I focus on things and I'm fucking determined, I get them done. Um, so I wanted to point that out is that like, people, when people go in and they bet all their chips, man, I really feel like if it's in their heart, like it'll happen. Um, and so my mom, for whatever reason, has always been super supportive. And she originally was always that parent that was like, oh, you're going to be a lawyer, you're going to be a doctor, because that's the American dream, especially for immigrant families. When they
Sure.
come to the States, it's like, yo, you got to get the top, most secure, the best, lifestyle. So whatever career aligns with that, that's what you got to go for, college and everything. But for whatever reason, when I started to drift towards music and the creative arts, my mom was like fully on board. She was like, of course, I would love for you to be a doctor or a lawyer, but if this is what you want to do, um, I support you.
Man, that's
And
crazy.
she's always been, I don't know why, but she's always been super supportive. One of my biggest fans, even though she don't even understand the English music that I be making, but um, she's always been like my biggest fan. And to this day, like I talked to her earlier today and she's just like, she knows I'm working hard as fuck right now. She's like, yo, like, stay focused. Like, don't worry, everything's gonna work out,
Bro,
And
that's 100% a blessing to have a parent
it
like
is,
that.
man.
It is.
I know I'm lucky. I know
Yeah.
I'm lucky in that
So
regard.
when sometimes a lot of parents of let's just say of like foreign descent, right? Like immigrant parents, right? They
Yeah.
project their life goals on their kids.
Hmm.
And then what I see is what they'll do is they'll project those life goals on their kids, and if they have the audacity to dream, right, or they have to have their own dreams or their own life ambitions, they aspire to do something different. There's like a bitterness about it. They're upset
Yeah.
at you because they had to make decisions to put you in a position where you could succeed, and
And
that
then
you
you don't
didn't,
take that.
and then you don't fuck. They think that you're choosing to fail, where
Hmm.
you're thinking I'm doing what it is that I believe is going to be the best
Yeah.
option for me, and they have a hard time adjusting their thought process for that. You're one of the lucky ones. Some parents, they kind of hold on to that grudge like
That
indefinitely.
could become a hurdle. That can
Yeah,
definitely become a
it
hurdle.
becomes a moot point for them forever. They
Yeah.
won't let go of that mental block that you chose to do something other than what it is that I thought you should have done.
Yeah.
And that's it's a tough, becomes a tough relationship because it limits that
Yeah.
relationship for sure.
And I see it in colleagues all the time. My contemporaries, I see how they struggle with the family aspect, which
Sure.
I'm like, man, that's not even a factor for me. Like, yeah, and for a while it was because I'm like, damn, like, I was really, I guess once I became aware that like my music wasn't for everybody, I was like, damn, I hope, I'm not like upsetting anyone. But at the same time, I was like, nah, like I know I got the people that matter, their support. And at the end of the day, this is my life, and I just gotta do me,
For sure.
So
For sure.
yeah. So What was the other point that you had said? You were like, so, damn, you were like, so you build a studio, you know,
You built
you guys,
you build a studio, and you decide to come back to South Jersey. You decide
yeah,
that New York, Brooklyn, the Bronx, excuse me, the Bronx is not where you want to be. You borrow
yeah,
this money, right, to build this
yeah,
thing. What's the next few
yeah.
steps? Like, what is it that you're doing next? You're deciding to make this
So,
a business. How are you
yeah,
monetizing it? How are you making this a profitable
right,
thing where your mom's not like,
yeah,
I just blew 16 grand on your education and you're out
yeah,
here just doing nothing? Like, what's the next step there?
yeah. So, I basically started just going ham, like promoting like these little demo packages for like artists in the area. So I would be like, yo, we'll do a 5-song EP for like 500-600 bucks, or you know, we'll do 8 songs for 800.
So what are you
So
doing?
I would do that.
Are you master? Like, what are you doing? Explain that.
Recording, editing, mixing, mastering, sending it out. Them coming over to listen back to the mixes. Oh, they want their vocals up on this one. They want this down on this one. Like everything, top to bottom. And as a result of that, I began to spend way too much time working on other people's stuff, and I felt that my own craft wasn't getting the attention that it deserved, from myself. So I was doing like 12-hour sessions. Like people come in at 12, don't leave till 1, 2 a.m., just to get a $100 payment, and we got 3 more tracks to go. You know what I mean? So like at a certain while, I would say like a year and a half into that, it began to become clear to me that I wasn't doing it the most efficient way. And so what I did was I started to scale back on how many people I would let come to the studio to record, even on a single session basis. So I would start to limit myself and be like, yo, I'm only doing 1 session like in a day, and I'm only doing 3 sessions this week because I got to spend some time working on my projects. So there came a point, I would say this was like 2.5 years into that. So let's just go from 2012 to like 2014. 2014, I decided, yo, I'm shutting the studio down from clients, not taking no more clients. And that was a big decision at the time because I had so many people that relied on my services in the area because it was the most high quality services that you can get for that price point in the area. Um, and yeah, I was actually kind of nervous about telling everybody. Like that's how big of a deal it was. So I was like nervous to telling everybody, like, yo, the studio is no longer, accepting, sessions. So I did that though. And that's when everything began to flourish for me. I worked on a couple mixtapes from 2014 to 2015. I worked on like 2 projects, and I had some before that in 2013 and 2012, but they didn't get that much attention like from me. So 2014, 2015, I really buckled down and worked on my own projects, and that resulted in Love Being Broke, which became a classic amongst my core fans. Um, and I did that with myself, Vince Luna, Lunatic, and Michael Luna. We worked on that for months, and my manager at the time, Sean Baptist, which I connected with him. I connected with him by opening up for a rap group that was like really doing their thing in Philly. But basically, he jumped on board as my manager at that time, and we worked on this project. And this project came out like really good. I thought it was going to change my life. It didn't end up changing my life in that kind of way, but it was a big project, and it was like my proudest work up until from 2011. Everything was preparation for that project in 2015 when I released it. And to me, I still think it's a masterpiece to this day. So yeah, so 2015, I would say was my official ascension to like, okay, I'm a full blown artist. Like I'm about to break into the game type of thing.
So wait, hold on.
So
You meet this guy at a show. You're opening up for a different act. You meet this guy at a
yeah,
show. He's managing a different act. He goes, wait, hold on a second. I think this guy got some talent. Let me see if I can connect with him. And he ends up being
yes,
he ends up being a manager.
sort of. So basically, 2014, I'm like really trying to expand because I'm like in my full artist bag, right? So at the time I was trying to figure out, man, how can I get shows? You know, how could I like expand to like Philly and New York, like to do shows and shit? Because I had done a bunch of open mics and stuff in New York, and that kind of got me that like New York City's like the trenches when it comes to live performance. Like you got to get your stripes in New York City. So I did that when I was in New York. But so I'm home now, and I'm like, okay, I got to get back into the swing of live performance and stuff. So my younger brother, Kenny, he must have been like 14 at the time. He sends like a cold email to the manager of a group that he was a huge fan of. That group was called OCD Motion Twist. I don't believe they're together anymore. Recently, I think they broke up, but I could be wrong. But anyway, they were like popping in Philly. They were like, they made it type of thing, right? So he sends a cold email to their manager. I don't even know. Like, this is my younger brother. I'm like, I don't even know if he even knows how to use email. But he sends an email. Their manager responds after listening to a couple tracks, and he's like, "Yo, this is fire. I'd love to connect. Come out, open up for Motion Twist at the TLA in Philly, which is a legendary
I'm
venue."
familiar with TLA.
So I was like, fuck, like I lost my shit. I thought it was like, I was like, yo, it's game over. Like we about to go on tour, you know, all this stuff. So anyway, we do the show, tear it up. I remember they came out during my set, like, who the fuck is this, right? Like, it was fire. And I had a bunch of people come out from Jersey. It was dope. So we killed that, right? Their manager at the time, and I don't want to put too much of his business out there, but he basically was thinking about leaving the situation of managing them. And he thought I had a lot of potential. He wasn't the guy that I mentioned. He was like another guy. So we linked up, and he's like, yo, a couple weeks later, after sending him music, he's like, yo, I think I want to start managing you. He's like, you know, I got a lot of connects in the industry, and I feel like we could do a lot of damage. So I'm like, yo, let's fucking go. Right. So at this point, this became the biggest moment in my career up to date. Right. So, this is before.
Let me stop you right there.
Before Love Being Broke, quick.
Let me stop you right there. When you're an artist like that, and somebody says, I want to manage you, how contractual is that obligation?
Handshake.
It's all handshake.
At that point.
So there's no contractual obligation. It's not like you guys are signing a deal together. This is somebody that sees talent in you and says, listen, I think I can take you a little bit further than where you're at.
Yeah. The reason why it was such a big deal was because even though it was just on a handshake, he had been with those artists from bedroom days, I guess you could say, to like, you know, semi-stardom, where they were like doing their own tours independently, and they were like living off of their music type of shit. So I took it as like, yo, shit, well, if you did that, then you have the tools and abilities to help me take what I'm doing to the next level, right? So this was before Love Being Broke though, right? So this is like early 2014, late 2013. So we start working on an EP. So he's like, all right, the first thing we got to do is get a body of work together so that I could present it to the proper people. So for like 6 months, bro, I work on this 10-track EP, like my best work. At the end of this 6 months, he starts giving me the runaround regarding launching the project. And he's like, yo, I got some things happening, da-da-da-da-da. Long story short, he ends up telling me that he's dealing with too much stuff emotionally and in his life where he can't give the project and my career its full attention, his full attention. So he was like, but what I am going to do, I'm going to have to step away from this, unfortunately. But what I am going to do is I'm going to put you in contact with my guy, who's also a manager, and he works closely with the guys right now. So that ended up being the guy, Sean Baptist. And he's from where's he from? Not Buffalo. What's the other place in New York? What?
New York's a big place. You talking about the city, man, or are you talking about outside the city?
No, it's outside the city. It's not one of the boroughs.
New Rochelle?
Nah, it's the other one. Fuck. Oh, Albany.
Albany.
So he's from Albany, right?
Right.
So he so he connected me with him, and we had a conversation, and he was just like, yo, I'm gonna help you out. So it was another handshake type of thing, right? And I was like, yo, I was like very hesitant because I was kind of like I was fucked up over that last situation. I was like, man, I just put all this work into it. And then he listened to the project and he's like, yo, this is good, but you got potential to do better. Let's scrap that and work on a whole new project.
Wow.
So that project never even came out, which still like fucking bugs me to this day because there was some good ass music for that time period of where I was. But so we started working on what then became known as Love Being Broke. So that was a long process. Like I would say like 8-9 months, but it was my best work to date at that time. Came out in 2015. I finished it at the end of 2014, came out in 2015 because of the whole rollout plan that we had and everything. And basically he had like, I'm gonna say he had what you would call like barbershop connections. You know what I'm saying? Like he knew people, but it wasn't like he was calling up any labels or anything like
Right.
that. You know what I mean? Like he just knew a couple of people in the business and stuff like that. But it wasn't anything life changing. Solid dude. You know, I'm still friends with him. We've had our moments, but solid dude. And we ended up making something great. You know, I was proud of that.
So where do you go from there? You make this album. It gets distributed.
Yeah.
How does he distribute the album?
So what we did was we formed some very surface level connections with some of the blogs that were at the time, you know, big blogs. So like DJBooth.net was a big one. Good Music All Day was a big one. And maybe a couple others, but when the project launched, all the people that were supposed to launch it, like completely flaked. And it was a bad launch because of that. So, you know, we released 2 videos, and leading up to the album launch, then we launched it. The blogs that said they were going to launch it didn't launch it, fucked up our game plan a little bit. But eventually, like a week or 2 later, they picked it up, and you know they showed love, so it was all good. But basically, we had our differences about how everything came out at the end, and that's when I kind of decided, like, you know what, I'm gonna just go my own way. You go your way, and you know, there's no beef, but you know, time to expand. You know, so that was a big moment. That was a big chapter because it was the end of a chapter. Once we kind of split.
So where do you go from there? You release this record. You don't feel like it's getting he's not doing his job as a promoter or a distributor or whatever the case may be. Whatever it is, it didn't get distributed correctly. So where do you go from there? How do you muster up the courage to keep going at that point?
I'm not gonna lie, man. I don't even think heartbroken is the word. You know, I really felt like the quality of the music in that project was like so contemporary. It was different, but it was at the quality and at the level of the biggest names in music. And I still believe that to this day at that time period. So I thought that project was going to change my life and everybody around me. It didn't. And it took me a couple months to kind of get myself together to like muster up the confidence and the courage to be like, man, fuck all that. Like, I'm gonna just continue to just pump these records out. So what I did though, that was different, was that I saw how much time I put into that project and what the results were. It did get attention. It did get some attention, but I was expecting that project to get like Chance the Rapper, acid rap level attention.
Right.
It did not.
Right.
And the difference was that while my project appeared on 1-2 blogs, that Chance the Rapper, acid rap, when that came out, it was everywhere.
So what was the difference?
Literally everywhere.
Right. What is the difference between that album's distribution? And I guess you answered that question with this guy having barbershop connections. He was not an industry insider to distribute it that way. But elaborate on the differences between somebody,
Right.
because Chance was independent, right, during that time, right? During
So
acid rap?
to even to this day, even up until last year, there's still a lot of speculation around what his trajectory actually was, because at that time I just wasn't conceptually experienced enough in the industry to really understand how the machine works.
How it
You know what
moves.
I mean? So and by the way, because I'm sure one day he'll see this, like I'm not throwing any shade at anybody. I'm just, giving my experience. So he knows it's all love. But basically, we tried to like hit people up and be like, yo, we got some dope music, da 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 da. This person, that person, like just check this out. Let us know if you would like to support it. And a couple people did.
Right.
But Chance the Rapper, he had, whether you want to call it PR or resources in high places, I don't know what the fuck, but he was on everything. Two Dope Boys, DJBooth.net, Good Music All Day, Fake Shore Drive, like everything. Hot New Hip Hop, whatever it was at that time, he was on there.
Why do you
That did not happen.
why do you think all these blogs, all these distributions supported his record like that? Or I mean, what is the difference between
It's
independent
manufactured. It's manufactured. It's not like they all on the same day heard it and were like, yo, this has to go. It wasn't that. That's what I would consider to be organic, truly independent. It's like somebody heard your shit and they're like, yo, this is fucking fire. You know what I'm saying? Or like you really did the legwork of hitting everybody up, meeting everybody, making those connections and building those relationships, and everybody just happened to fuck with you. But what that was a baby version of what labels do today, still do today. You know what I mean? It was like everybody got the directive from whoever and was like, yo, on this day, this goes out. Here's the money. Here's the relationship that you're continuing to coddle. And this is the program for this day. You know what I'm saying? This airs after the Super Bowl on, whatever.
Yeah.
Well, that's how it works. So that's the difference. And I don't know if it was money, relationships, or whatever, but to this day, people argue that because Chance, has the family background of being in the president's, house and all this stuff. Like his dad worked for like President Obama. He was part of the campaign and stuff like that. I don't know. I don't really want to get into it because I don't want to try to make it sound like I know what the fuck actually happened. But I do know from what I've learned over the years that doesn't just happen unless there's a machine behind it.
It's distribution, bro. Distribution is a business. And
so
in every respect, distribution is a business.
Yeah. So that was the difference, because when I play, anyway, I don't want to get into comparing, but I know my shit was fire.
Right. So
like you can't convince me otherwise.
So you're going through this process, things are not working, right?
Yeah.
Do you ever do you ever stop to think to yourself, maybe I need to educate myself in a different area? Maybe I need, do you start to think to yourself, what other options do I have? Are you educating yourself generally in other areas? Or are you so committed to your craft that it's like, I got blinders on, I got tunnel vision, bro, and this is all I want to do?
Nah, I'm a person of many hats and many skills. And anybody that knows me can tell you that I'm not somebody who just accepts things as they are and like, well, fuck it, I'm gonna just do this because this is all I know how to do. No, I'm the kind of person that used to take apart remote control cars because I just needed to know how the motor worked. And I figured out how it worked, I'm the kind of person that needs to reverse engineer things and understand how they work so that I can then apply my own methods to it. So I quickly became somebody who did their own fucking outreach, did their own, maintain their own relationships with the blogs, even after my manager, stopped, and shot my own videos, taught myself how to do video because I didn't have a videographer. Everything, remember the circumambulation that I mentioned by Carl Jung? Because I didn't fit in and because I didn't have the resources to do a lot of things within my journey, ultimately, I had to learn how to do those things and get those resources from myself as opposed to other people. So, one of my favorite quotes of all time is necessity is the mother of invention. You know, that is the theme. That is the theme of my journey. Because I couldn't get in with these people that knew these people and could do this and provide that, I had to figure out how to do that shit myself. And because I didn't have the funds and the capital to do this, I got to build it on my own. I got to figure out how to make it from zero, So I realized distribution and funding was a thing. So I tried to learn everything I could about marketing, about PR. I hired people. I remember I was paying these people from North Jersey $1,200 a month for like 3-4 months because they promised the P word in marketing, right? They promised to deliver on getting my stuff out there. Nothing.
So you're learning all these things and you're teaching yourself how to learn along the process. You're figuring out how to learn.
Actually, I want to make sure that I highlight this because what you just said is super important. One of the biggest things that I learned at the end of my program from one of my teachers in audio school was that he was like kind of giving us like parting words. And he was like, hey, just remember that you didn't come here to learn how to be an audio engineer. You came here to learn how to learn once you leave here. And I walked away with that frame of mind that because the philosophy at audio school is that you're not going to learn everything that you need. You're not going to walk out of there mixing like the people that mix Rihanna. You're going to walk out of there with the essentials and the toolkit to understand and dissect and reconstruct and build and develop those skills over time with that foundational knowledge. So everything that I did moving forward was deconstructing, learning, and applying,
So where are you headed at this point? Where's your trajectory? And what year is it? What year is it?
So it's late 2015, early 2016. I read a book that was recommended in the YouTube creator section, the help section for creators in YouTube. They were giving tips on how to be a successful YouTuber, like how to get your channel out there. And they referenced a book called Primal Branding. Excuse me, by I think it's like Greg something, but if you look for it, you'll find it. It has like a tribal tiki mask on the cover. But anyway, so they mentioned this book, and it fascinated me because the concepts that they were talking about made me understand marketing on a different level and how YouTubers became YouTubers. So what they would do is they would focus on frequency and consistency. So YouTubers got into that whole, new video, new vlog every Tuesday, every Thursday. And that was like I would say the pinnacle of when that started to boom, where like vloggers started to do like a scheduled video, right? So you would know for Jenna Marbles, I didn't watch Jenna Marbles, but you would know like she does her videos every Tuesday or some shit like that. So I was like, wow. So I read the book and then I was like, okay, frequency and consistency helps build expectation in consumers, and it creates a pattern and habit where they need that fix, kind of like Ninja Turtles every morning. Ninja Turtles is coming every morning.
Yeah,
exactly. So that theory kind of lit up a light bulb in my head. So 2016, I start releasing a record every week. 2016. I did that from 2016 all the way to almost the end of 2017.
How are you distributing that record? You're releasing a record. How's it getting out?
SoundCloud, and then I added to at the time I was using CD Baby and TuneCore. So with those, it would go up onto Spotify. Well, I don't think Spotify was around at the time. Maybe it was, but iTunes and everywhere else.
So this is a syndication platform? It pushes your content to multiple platforms?
Yeah. It was the only way you could upload music and have it on iTunes. You had to go through a distributor like that, unless you were on a major label. So CD Baby and TuneCore. Eventually, I stopped using TuneCore because you got to pay $10 every time you upload to TuneCore, and then you got to pay that on a yearly basis. So if you drop 100 songs, you got to pay $1,000 a year plus whatever you continue to drop. Where CD Baby was just you pay it once and then they take a percentage for the lifetime of it, which eventually I realized was not good math. But Anyway, so so I'm releasing on SoundCloud, YouTube, all the music platforms, distribution platforms like iTunes, and I'm just literally like almost like fucking panhandling my music. Like, yo, anytime I get the chance, I'm like, yo, check out my music, da 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 da. I would go to barbershops in Pleasantville and fucking rap for the barbers and tell them, that I just dropped a new project. Like I did all that shit. All the guerrilla shit you could think of, I did. I waited for Jay-Z outside of the 4040 Club when he came into town and it was in the paper. I fucking waited outside for 3 hours, me and my boy Vince, Lunatic, in the fucking rain, cold as shit, waited, saw him walk in, and in that fucking 5-second window, called his name out. He looked back. I told him I got a CD for him. He walked inside. Nothing happened. I did like all the crazy shit you could think of because I was always that kind of person that was like, yo, this person is going to be at this place. Nah, I'm waiting outside. I don't care if it's for 8 hours. I'm gonna tell them what I do and I'm gonna show them what I do. And I always kind of thought that would be the moment that everything changed and everything came together. I don't know why. I always thought that was just a narrative that I had in my head of how it was going to happen. And to be honest with you, that narrative stayed with me up until like last year when I finally woke up and I realized like ain't nobody gonna change your life for you. You got to change it for yourself.
Facts. So this is 2018 now. Yeah. You're
so 2017. I'm still releasing a song every week, right? Mad Records out, and then I have a conversation with a friend who is traveling the world as like a group trip thing that he was doing. So he comes back from like Prague, and I met him through a friend. He comes back from like Prague or some crazy place, and he's in town, and it just so happens that his hobby was music. He built the studio in his house and everything. It was legit, but he was just kind of more of a hobbyist. But he was like, he came by the studio one day when he came into town, and he was like, yo, like, I feel like you've done everything you could possibly do as a local artist in this area. I feel like you've hit your glass ceiling. Like you've done everything. And we haven't even talked about it, but me and my boys, my partners, Mike and Vince, we put together an independent regional tour, like fucking completely bootstrapped it, got sponsors on our own, everything, did shows like in Jersey, Pennsylvania. Like it was crazy. It was dope. It was small, but it was successful in that aspect that we pulled it off. Anyway, so my boy is like, yo, you did everything. You toured, you talked to everybody you can. You've been doing this shit for years. You shot the videos, you did all that shit, but you're still here. Like you haven't broken into like the industry. And when I hear your music, I hear it the same way I hear J. Cole, Drake, whoever. So like the only thing that I could think of is that maybe you're not in the right place. That conversation, that night, I called my girlfriend. I'm like, yo, we're moving to LA. And 2017, 2 months later, we moved to LA. We drive across the country with my best friends. And we get to LA and we stay with my brother and his best friend. All four of us share a 2-bedroom apartment in West Hollywood for the next 2 years. And now this is my 3rd year in LA.
That's crazy. So you're in LA, bro. You follow your heart, man. I'll give you that. It's not easy to do, man. There's a lot of along the way of trying to build something, man. There's a lot of reasons to doubt. A lot of people kick you,
Yeah, man.
And some people do it like a smooth kick. They don't kick you with They don't kick you with like a karate kick to the head. They just kind of kick some dust on you along the way, And that's a hard situation because you see that you're not having the success that you want. I can only imagine going through a situation like that. You're given all this time, all this effort, you committed yourself, and then you say, you know what? I'm going to drop everything. I'm going to pick myself up, and then I'm going to go like literally to the other side of the country.
Yeah.
And start there.
Yeah, it was crazy.
So
I sold everything.
You sold everything.
Yeah, I sold everything. because I had left my job, my regular 9 to 5. I was working security, front desk security at this condominium in Ventnor. And I was so fucking over that place. And I felt like it was like sucking my soul out of my body, being there, wasting my time when I knew I had so many other abilities and things that I could be doing with my time. And so eventually I mustered up the courage to like put in my 2 weeks. So I did. And I told everybody like, yo, I'm gonna leave here to tour around the country and fucking blow up. And, we put together the little tour once I left, but I started to struggle with money and that shit was hard. And that's around the time that you and I kind of like started to connect on a business level, and a creative level. And I was under a lot of different pressures, but basically my Love Being Broke project is based around the concept that I kind of knew my family was in a lot of financial trouble. And my biggest fear was losing the studio. That was my biggest fear. So when I made that project, I was so like in such terror that I would lose like the one place that I felt like was like hope, for my life, like the studio, and eventually after I left my job, did the tour, was struggling with money right before the LA thing happened. My mom was telling me that like, I think you should go because I don't know what's going to happen with the house. And so that shit was crazy. Like, I just kind of felt like it's like, I kind of felt like it was a kick, but it was like you're already off the ledge type of kick. Like,
Yeah.
so, even if you don't want to go, like you got to.
You got to go.
So,
there's not going to be anything for you to stay for.
Yeah. And yeah, man. And we did end up losing the house and the studio. But everything happens for a reason, man. And I think that it was like it happened at the right exact time that it needed to, because had I been in Jersey and that happened, I don't know what I would be doing, or how I would have managed to continue, because I wouldn't have a place to create. So yeah, my girlfriend was super ready to like try something new, and she had her clothing line, and she was working on that. It was going well, and like we just kind of were like ready, So like we came out here, saved up a couple grand with selling everything, and drove across the country, got here, and that was the end of the New Jersey music chapter, which was a long one. And the beginning of the new chapter, which would then become the LA chapter, which we're kind of, I would say, in the middle of right now.
Sure. So you're in LA. Yeah. I would consider LA one of the top markets in music, right? LA and New York are top markets in music, along with the South, parts of the South, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So you're in LA, and what do you find in LA? Do you find that you're looking for that moment? You're still in a mindset where you're searching for a moment. You're searching for that chance, that opportunity, that moment, right? Mm-hmm. So take me through that, and what's the next series of events?
So I get to LA, and I was reading. I'm always like, kind of around the whole topic of like, okay, so things aren't working. What do you do? So my mind is always working on like figuring stuff out, like I have a very like problem solving approach, the way that I think. So I'm always reading, I'm always digesting videos on how something works, like, fucking website design or like whatever, like I'm always learning. And one of the books that I was reading was around the concept of compound interest and compounding. And it's like that riddle that people ask. They're like, would you take a penny that doubles every day for 30 days? Or would you take $1 million? Most people choose $1 million, but they don't understand how compounding works. That penny that doubles every day in the course of 30 days is over $7 million.
Sure.
So
it's the eighth wonder of the world. They call interest the eighth wonder of the world, right? For
I've heard of that.
For a reason. A lot of people don't understand the idea or the concept, for good or for bad. right?
Right.
For
Yeah.
good or for
Yeah.
bad.
For sure.
So they don't
Because it
understand the
can both.
concept. It can go both ways. So
Yeah.
they don't understand that in many different formulas. So you read this book and you're in
Read this
LA.
book.
You're in one of the
I'm
top markets. What is your trajectory at this point?
So I'm in LA. I don't know what the fuck I'm about to do with all my music gear. How I'm gonna set it up. Me and my girlfriend literally live in a bedroom. Like, yeah, we share an apartment with my brother and his best friend, and that was a blessing in its own. But like now I'm like, okay, where am I gonna record? You know what I'm saying? So like I somehow finesse it, set all my shit up against the wall, whatever. Uh, and I start recording. Very uncomfortable. Going from a place, a creative place, and you know this because you have your own creative space. Having the ability to step into a physical place where you
It's
know
priceless.
it's meant and dedicate,
It's
bro, that is
priceless.
a blessing.
Yeah.
Like a blessing. So I had that for many years. So I went from that to, and I was lucky to have it for the time that I did. I went from that to like being in an apartment, people upstairs, people next to me. Like it's
Yeah.
uncomfortable. I'm trying to get into my creative space. I'm like, I got people all around me. I feel crowded.
You got to learn how to
Very
create in
uncomfortable.
a different environment.
Exactly. Very uncomfortable. But between that book and a vlog that Gary Vee had with Nipsey Hussle, rest in peace, where he talks about how he thinks the future is going to have an artist that releases a song every day because of the way that content is moving and the internet is progressing. Like there's no way to flood the market because the market is constantly in a state of flooding by like everything. Even if you're not dropping shit, 100 billion other
Everybody
people
else.
are. So
Yeah.
it's like, so the only way to break through is to be consistent and drop the most shit. So I take that plus the concept of compounding. And then I also heard something from my guy, Ralph Smart, Infinite Waters, who's a big YouTube channel on YouTube, based around like spirituality and shit like that. And he talks about how his channel, can you hear me still?
Yeah, I hear you.
He talks about how his channel went from like 30,000 subscribers to over 100 because of compounding. I'm like, oh shit, like the universe is talking to me. So I'm like, I'm gonna go from dropping a song every week to dropping a song every day.
Crazy.
And I made that decision. And I was like, I can do it. At first I was like, nah, this is crazy. Ain't no way. But then I'm like, wait, I make the beat in a couple hours. I write the lyrics in like an hour or two. I record it in like 2-3 hours. I mix it and I master it. I could be done in a work shift. You know what I mean? So it turns out it's not that simple, but I started to do it and I pulled it off. And I would say that every now and then I would run into a situation where I would lapse, you know, overnight, like pull an all-nighter into the next day. And that, that happened every now and then, which kind of threw my timing off, but it didn't change the fact that every single day that I woke up and opened my eyes, a new song was made. And that resulted in 281 songs.
Crazy,
Went
bro.
from the end of 2017 to middle of 2018.
Where are these songs? Somebody wants to hear them. Somebody wants to. Where are
They're
they?
on everything. SoundCloud, Spotify,
So somebody does a
everything.
search for you, Kev Decor
Yeah.
on SoundCloud. They can find them. So
Yeah.
how are you like? How do you live your life making songs
Man,
every day? Like, how do you afford to live, bro?
man, I look back on these days, which weren't that long ago, and I kind of cringe, man, because like the fact that I put myself through that, not only that, but I put my girlfriend through that shit. I don't even know how she's still with me after that shit, right? So,
Bro,
I mean,
that's the epitome of rider right there.
yeah,
Somebody
man. I
sticks through
mean,
you through that whole process. So how are you like? How did you live? Like, how did you?
right. So, for the first couple of months, I had money from selling everything. So that was like my rep money. Then, so I didn't get a job right away. Then I had a couple valuable things that I brought with me, tools that when things got to that point, I was like, yeah, I gotta sell this. Excuse me. So I ended up selling my camera, my gimbal, a bunch of other shit that I had to pay rent. And And then there was a couple months where my brother had to cover me. You know what I'm saying? Like, but he believed everybody like believed so much in what we were doing that it was like, if I gotta throw my last pair of sneakers into this shit to like,
Crazy.
to get the shit to pop, like that's what I'm gonna do. You know what I'm saying? So like literally that was the mentality. That was the group thing that we had. We were so focused on that. My brother became my manager. My girlfriend was kind of managing me during the interim before he became my manager. And together between us three, it was like we were just throwing everything we had into like making sure that I was in this fucking seat that I'm sitting in right now, in front of this computer, making a beat, writing, recording, mixing, mastering, and uploading to SoundCloud and DistroKid before I went to bed.
Bro,
That's all I did.
that dedication is insane. I don't know a lot of
I
people.
don't even
I don't know a lot of
know.
people that would do that, bro. Honestly, I don't know a lot of people that would put themselves. The people, and honestly, I'm gonna keep it real with you. I don't know a lot of family members that would believe so heavily in somebody else's dream that they would support them on that level. That's crazy. You you have you have interesting family, bro. For real, for real.
Yeah, man. I'm blessed, man. I am
Yeah,
blessed, man. I really am. Um, I I definitely put my health in high risk. Bro, I didn't see a dentist for the first time in like 3 years, like until a couple months ago. Like, I mean, like that's the level of like commitment, which some people might look at that and be like, bro, like what are you doing? But this was all I saw. It was complete tunnel vision. And I look back at that version of me and I'm like, I don't even know how I was able to get into that mind state. Because now if I try to get back into that flow, like I would have too many logical reasons why I shouldn't. You know what I mean? I guess I learned some lessons, but you know,
if you try to get back into a flow where you're hyper focused on that one thing, there there's so much pain surrounding that.
there's pain, but there's also so many lessons of like that's not it.
That's
That's
not
not
it.
it. That was a long lesson.
Yeah.
It's just not the way, you
So
know?
so this happens the first year that you're in California.
Yeah,
So
first year.
was there any yield? Was there any fruit from that labor?
So what happened was my brother was working at a lounge that was a rooftop lounge that was one of the most poppin' lounges in West Hollywood. It makes it sound more glamorous than it is, but you know, it was a bar. It was a popular bar. A lot
Yeah.
of industry people ended up just stumbling into this bar on their regular routine bar hopping route. And so because my brother Kenny, he has a knack for understanding like who is who in movie and music. He just understands, like he knows if he sees a face and a name once, he'll remember that shit. So he would recognize people coming in. He'd be like, yo, I manage this artist, Kev Decor. Every now and then they would be like, oh, you know, he's your brother, and then da 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 da. And then it would kind of catch people's interest, right? And then he would be like, oh yeah, he's been dropping a song every day for 4 months. And then people would be like, wait, what? You know what I'm saying? And then they'll be like, okay, here's my email. Like I gotta hear what the fuck, I gotta see this shit.
It's just different frequency and
Yeah.
consistency. It was
Yeah.
it was at least it caught people's attention at the very least.
Exactly. So a couple months of that resulted eventually into this one guy. My brother was a doorman. This one guy came up and he was trying to get in. Like he was trying to like basically not wait in line. There was a long ass line. So he was like, yo, I'm with some big people right now, we'll pay you, da 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 da. Like if we could just get in. So my brother's like, bro, you're gonna have to pay like big money to get in right now. So he's like, all right, let me go talk to these people. So he goes to talk to these people, the A&R guy. And then he comes back, and then my brother was like, what industry do you work in? And he's like, music, da da da. And I might have some of the details mixed up, but basically, essentially, he ends up telling him like, my brother tells him, give me your email. I'm gonna send you some stuff and I'll let you guys in. So he did. So he sends them the email, and then that same night, the A&R hits him back. He's like, yo, these are fire. like, let's set up a studio session. So it turns out the A&R works for a boutique label that has a JV, which in the music industry is a joint venture with a major label. So, so we set up these sessions for me to come in and write for the boutique label. And, you know, long story short, I end up writing there for like 3 months or like 2.5 months. And during that time, they decide that they want to work out a deal because I guess they like what they're hearing from me, and they got a couple other people, so they're thinking of forming like an OVO type of situation, right?
Right.
So, like a small label that partners with a major label, like a Universal, Republic, or whatever. So this deal gets offered, but it all stemmed from that one night because the guy heard that I was like doing this crazy ass shit, and I was like 7 months in at this point,
right,
for some crazy number. So
the utility of you putting out that frequency didn't have the intended effect, but what it did get was somebody else's intention. It got somebody else's attention.
That's exactly what happened. And don't get me wrong, the numbers were going up and stuff like that on Spotify and all this stuff. And my brother was pitching the music to playlists, and this was around the playlist boom time when playlists became crucial and lucrative in the music business. So, we were sending music out. We were running ads on fucking Instagram, Facebook. We were doing everything you could fucking do. But what ended up really putting things in a different level was that chance encounter, and that slightly different thing that made somebody be like, wait, you're doing what? So that's how that materialized. And eventually I ended up entertaining the idea of this deal, got a lawyer, and we negotiated hard for like 2 months on the terms of this deal. And the day I was supposed to sign, I had a gut feeling. I woke up, I couldn't sleep. I woke up, I had a gut feeling. I was like, I'm not doing it. So that night I sent the email, and I was like, well, me and my brother, my manager at the time, sent the email, and it was like, like, I'm backing out. And the next morning, I thought these people were going to be fucking pissed because we spent so much fucking time negotiating. But the owner, the CEO, and the president of the label called me and were like, like, we got to do this. Like, we believe in you. Like, and I'm like, they were like, the only thing we built Rihanna, we built, these people, the only thing we know is top 1%. Like, we can do that with you.
This boutique label had those kind of names that they built?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. One of the people was Mark Jordan. He was Rihanna's manager and responsible for Rihanna becoming who she is. Anybody could look that up.
Bro, to know that and to back out of that deal, what's going through you? You gave up everything. You don't have anywhere to go. Like what? Yeah. Like take me through your mindset on what what's the thought process of saying that, no, I'm not doing this deal. How bad was that deal for you to say, I can't do this, bro? Like what is the deal?
Man, I don't know what it's been throughout my life. I just kind of been really in tune with my gut, man. Like when I get this feeling, it brought me back to New York and making that split decision that would have altered the course of my journey and my life forever, but going with my gut and feeling like it was right, and then going with my gut for LA and being like, damn, look at how far I've gotten. Look at who I'm talking to. Look at the conversations. Look at the phone calls. Look at the records. Like, I was right. You know what I mean? So like, and that was a gut feeling. So when I woke up and I'm like, something about this fucking shit just doesn't feel right. It was a gut feeling, and it was that same, there's a texture, there's a feeling, like a color to that feeling. You know what I mean? And I feel like only I can discern what that feeling is in my body. It's like my body has a certain reaction. And so when I felt that, I was like, nah, I can't. And then
real quick, a business partner of mine, when I first got into business on my own, I had a partner. Yeah. I was like 17, 18 at the time, and he was 31. Mm-hmm. So I was like young, inexperienced. I had the ability to sell. I was good with people. but I wasn't really
Yeah.
like matured, and like I didn't understand certain things. I didn't understand how numbers worked, how the money worked, a lot of that stuff, right? So
Yeah.
one day, you know, we get into a situation where we're working with this guy, and we're borrowing a lot of phones in order to sell these phones to
Mm,
customers. And we end up owing them a lot of money in phones to do that. And I
mm,
go, man, I just don't have like I don't I feel like that this is not the right way to go, right?
mm,
And he turns around and
yeah.
goes to me, then then we shouldn't be doing this. And I'm like, but what's the like? Why do I feel like? He's like, man, there's 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 a there's a school of thought that goes by the thinking is this: your mind is processing so fast that all you're getting is an emotion, and that's what that gut
Mm,
feeling is. That you haven't
mm,
deciphered the thought, you haven't unpacked
mm.
that thought
Wow.
into
Yeah.
what it is, and all you're getting is that gut emotion.
Yeah.
And it takes you a while to say, why do I feel like that? But that gut
Mm,
emotion sometimes is right. So for us in that scenario, it was definitely right. So you turn down the biggest deal of your life.
yeah.
Yeah, so take me through that.
So, um, I kind of, I let them talk, and he was like, man, just like trust me on this, you know. Um, and I felt like, man, I tried everything, man. I tried like, and anybody can say they tried everything, and in the back of their mind, they know like they didn't try that one thing. You know what I
Sure,
mean? Like
sure,
that one fucking thing that like,
sure.
well, did you wait outside the billboard for 5 hours? Like, but I really tried everything that I felt was within my reach to try, and I fucking worked hard and went to the extremes, and I felt like nothing worked. So I was like, maybe I'm that guy who's so fucking stubborn that doesn't see that he's in his own way. Maybe I need to expand, shake hands and meet people, and maybe I need to listen to people that have fucking actually done this shit on a massive level, and let go of the steering wheel for a little bit. And so that ended up being a decision that I took. And I was like, you know what? All right, man. In that same conversation, I was like, all right, let's do it. So next day,
So you ended up signing with that boutique label.
went to Staples, signed the contract, sent it out, and that was it. Um,
Why didn't you want to do
and
it? What was the reason?
I felt that the terms didn't reflect their energy
What about the terms?
during the con.
What specifically about the
Like
terms?
like there was a distribution period.
Hmm.
Um, and the distribution period was, in favor of both parties, but it was like, hey, we have a certain amount of time to decide whether or not we want to give you the big paycheck, you know, and let's just see how things go. Let's release a couple singles, you know what I mean? And there was no advance that made sense to like the work that I had put in. I'm like, bro, I could barely pay for what I'm gonna eat tonight. I don't even think I can. You're telling me you believe in me, but like I don't know how I'm paying for gas to get to the studio tomorrow. You know what I'm saying? So like if you believe in me, why aren't you like, yo, here's $5,000, like at least fucking,
Let's get
pay
moving.
your rent, like
Yeah.
I just, and then it was like, you know, little bullshit like oh, give us 18 months, you know, to kind of figure things out. I'm like, bro, for 18 months, you know how long I've been doing this for? Like, I'm ready to go now. Like
Yeah.
if you tell me 6 months, that's gonna be tough, but I'll take that. You know what I mean? But like 18 months. So I had to negotiate that down to 12 months. I tried to get it to 9 months, but they fought me on that. And I thought 12 was a reasonable middle ground between me and my attorney and my manager and my counsel. But like little things like that, where I was like, yeah, but you telling me you love me, but you're not really showing up to the table in that way, So
Right.
I kind of felt like they were half stepping when it came to the paperwork. So, but it also afforded me the opportunity to get out if I wanted to. So it also gave me the chance to not get in bed right away. And like, if I'm like, yo, shit is not what I thought it was, I'm out. So it gave me a little bit of a side door. So I was like, fuck it, you know? And so we went. And everything we talked about, everything. Like, bro, I didn't even mention this, but those first 2.5, 3 months that I was writing at the studio before the deal was even like a thing, I was still releasing a song every day. I would
Crazy.
release a song after I would go to the studio for like a 10 a.m. session, bang out 2 to 3 to 4 records, like hooks, some of them full records, then come home starving, start a brand new fucking record, have it done by like midnight, out the door by like 1, 2 a.m. Like I did that for like 2 months. I don't even know how the fuck I did that. So there was a point where I was making like 3, 4, 5 records in a day
That's
to
crazy.
appease the label and satisfy my goal, which my original goal was to do it for as long as I could. But in the back of my mind, I wanted to hit a year. But then the label shit came up and I was like, this is even better. So, I'm gonna stop. And I remember the president of the label coming into the studio one day and being like, yo, like this whole song every day shit is crazy, but I think you should stop. And I was like, why? And he was like the records are good, but imagine if you spent 7 days on one record, it could be great. And I kind of challenged him on it. And I was like, well, I believe in what I'm doing, man. And I'm not going to stop until I know that, I've gotten something out of it enough to where it makes sense to stop. So I kept going against his advice. And at that point, that was the biggest person I had ever been in the room with ever. So, minus myself, but
In hindsight, minus yourself. In hindsight,
yeah.
bro, you don't have a lack of confidence. That's for sure. Yo, what is it? What is it about that concept of releasing a record a day versus releasing, one every, like? Do you think that was the right move at that time?
I like.
Do you
I
do
think
you
it's
do
like,
you do you regret continuing doing that, or no? You feel like that was the right move to make.
nah.
I wanted to keep
I
releasing records.
regret. I regret stopping.
Yeah,
I regret stopping because had I did a year,
yeah,
I would have had something that I would have been really truly proud of. I'm like, damn, yo, but you can't tell me shit. I dropped the record for a whole year, you know. But I felt like at the time I was stopping for, like I felt like it served its purpose. The purpose was in practice to hone my craft and dedicate myself, but also to yield a result.
sure.
Because I felt like for the last 13 years at the time, because now it's been 15 years since I've been making music, but for the last 13 years at that time, I had been running through the jungle trying to get out. And it's like, by that point, when you're 13 years in trying to get out the jungle, man, I don't give a fuck if my boots are fucked up. I don't give a fuck if like my shirt is ripped and like I'm bleeding and my arm is like dead. Like I'm going full speed until something changes.
Yeah,
So like that's how I felt, because I was almost like my body was just like almost like a zombie. Like I felt like a zombie. I was losing so much sleep and like I wasn't eating right. And then, having issues with like the basic needs of like surviving, food, fucking my relationship. Like, like, bro, like it was crazy, so I didn't want to stop until I knew something resulted. There was a result from it,
you sacrificed too much.
Yeah. So no, I didn't want to stop, but ultimately I did, because then I felt like the deal was the game changer.
Yeah.
Once the deal happened, I thought like my life was going to change forever. Literally, I thought that was the moment, So, yeah.
So what's next? You got a record deal. They're not paying out the way that they need to pay out. It's a trial basis. They want to get married, but they're not sure, right?
Yeah.
So
the first red flag was that we had talked about covering my basic living expenses. And they were like, yo, the number's a little too high, but we could work with you on that. Like, we got you. We'll give you something on a monthly basis so you could, cover your basics. Once we signed, that was out the door.
So
That was the
they
first one.
didn't. So they told you they were gonna do something. They didn't do it.
Yeah, that was the first one, and that was just the beginning. Those 2.5 months of initial songwriting was I was writing for G-Eazy's album. I was writing for who else was I writing for? The biggest name at that time that I was writing for was G-Eazy. I wasn't with him in the studio and I wasn't like with his crew or anything like that, but the label had a strong relationship with his label and team, and they were accepting records directly from them for his album. So I was writing with the intent from the label and my perspective of like, yo, we're going to place these records. And you know, that nothing, never heard anything about that. So like I still got all the songs obviously, but I have like probably 60 to 75 songs that I made within that time period that are just sitting, like, because I recorded them to other producers' beats, which were names, bigger names at the time. And it was all because they were promising to get placements for those records. And that it benefited us when we were pitching them to have a bigger producer name attached to that pitch, you know, to that hook. So wasted content, you know.
So
music.
hold on. I'm a little confused about this. So they're telling these producers that they're gonna place these records with big names, correct?
Yeah.
So you're getting you're writing hooks for beats from these specific producers, but but they're not getting the names. Is that what the issue is?
They're not getting the placements. No,
they're not getting the placements. Why aren't they getting the placements?
That's what I was asking myself, because this is supposed to be the heads of this label were supposed to be the two of some of the biggest names in music, and like people that like produce for Dr. Dre, Eminem, like, you know, like big fucking names, you know. So like, you know, 2 times platinum, you know, like it's just like I was like, what's happening? What's going on? Like, why are we not even getting in the room in the studio with these people? And it was just, you know, anybody who's in the, if you're outside of the business, it's like, how could this be? How can this happen? You know, like, but when you're inside the business, it's like, this is common practice. They give you the typical runaround, like, oh man, we sent the email, the manager is out of town, he's in Chicago for 2 weeks.
So what is it? The artist doesn't want to take the record? Is that what it is?
I don't even know if the artists listen to the records.
That's
because
crazy.
they never gave me a, yo, he heard it, you know, he passed.
Yeah.
I never even got that. And that would have been a respectable thing.
Yeah.
That's a common thing.
Yeah.
You know, but I didn't even get that. I remember I was sending hooks out for Meek's album at the time. And it was like the head of the label had a direct line to Meek. And like he couldn't even tell me whether or not, he couldn't even confirm whether or not he sent it. He just told me that they passed on his beat that he sent with ASAP Ferg on the hook and like all this like crazy shit. And I'm just like, all right. Cause at that time, you know, the relationship is still new. So you don't want to like start stepping on toes and shit, you know,
right.
You kind of got to like play the game a little bit. So, you know, I try to stay calm and collected and not focus too much on that shit, you know?
Yeah. So you're making all this music, it's basically getting shelved. That's where you're at.
Yeah, basically.
Like a lot of music, 78 tracks or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So where are you at in this process? How far into your 1-year deal with the record company are you?
So it wasn't a 1-year deal. It just had a 1-year period where once that 1 year was fulfilled, either party can decide whether or not they want to continue.
I understand.
And move on to.
So you had an option to exit, an exit option.
Yeah. So, so once the placements weren't kind of getting placed, the focus moved on to like, all right, let's start getting your singles ready. I had so much music that they were like, yo, send me a folder of like the best songs that you had before the deal that you want me to hear. And we'll see if we could rework them and re-release them with like some real muscle, like on a major release.
Sure.
So we did that and we found a solid 15 to 20 records. Then we boiled that down to like a solid 12. So for like 6 to 7 or 8 months, I was perfecting and rearranging and like relaying down verses, like, oh, you know, this verse is tight, but like, let's redo this one. Like, let's lay down this hook with like different harmonies. You know, like I was taking direction because in my eyes, I'm like, yo, these motherfuckers know what the fuck they're doing.
Yeah.
And I've been trying my way for 13 years. Something ain't clicking. So let me try something else, you know, like for once. So I did all that, eventually worked on new singles, did all that. And then we picked like 3 or 4 records that we were going to launch as like singles for an EP that was going to have like 8 songs on it or some shit like that. And basically, man, that's where like shit really got messy because I delivered on my behalf. The music was there. Everything was great. They thought it was fire. Like, then once we started getting the details for the music video and we had the major label partner involved, which was Island Records, which is under Universal Music Group. Once all that kind of like came together, it was like when things really started to fall apart because I started to realize all the holes in the shit that they promised and what they weren't delivering on. And so that's when I started to become like, oh, okay.
What
what's really happening here.
What were those holes? What were the holes?
So we were supposed to launch the first single November of 2018. November turned into like, oh, you know what? Thanksgiving is coming up. And then the whole music industry takes holiday. So they shut down in December. So December's not a good month either. Let's shoot for the end of January because it gives people time to come back from vacation and then the offices start up and running again. So like end of January. End of January turns into middle of February. Like, oh, you know, let's make sure we give people enough time, Then February turns to March. March turns into April. April turns into May. May 31st. So we went from November, from supposedly, because they were gun ho about the whole thing. Like, yo, November, we're launching. November 2018.
We're launching the album. And it's going to be like a single.
Launching the single, the first single.
Right.
First single of the EP. All that turns into fucking May 31st. The first single finally comes out. No press release the way that it was supposed to be done. What they ended up doing was they ended up calling in a favor last minute, the day of, for a write-up on Lyrical Lemonade. That's what they ended up doing. That shit don't count in my book. Not for the kind of work that I put in. The video was a fucking disaster. I ended up having to color correct the video my fucking self. And that video was like 10 bands. I think more than that.
Crazy.
Like 12 grand.
Crazy.
Like the directors, bro, they disappeared in the middle of the process. Like we didn't have the video, nothing. And like we had to push our launch date back. So This was one of those holes where I'm like, yo, y'all are the label. You hired them. How the fuck are they just like disappeared and you can't do anything about it? And all this money, like,
so what
that was the whole thing.
What is the issue? Are they just not managing the situation correctly? Like, what's the problem? I don't understand.
So I'm gonna button this up and it's all gonna be clear in a second. So I'm just like, yo. Oh, hold on one second. Okay, let's change it. Can you hear me still?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. Looks like your headphones died on you. Go ahead.
I'm like, yo, how the fuck am I dealing with these people up here?
Yeah.
I'm down here.
Yeah.
And my execution and delivery is levels beyond theirs.
Okay. Let me just stop you right there. You're 13 years into a craft. You're working with your money. You're learning every aspect of what it is that you need to do on your own. Of course, your level of craft gonna be different. Of course, bro. The mistake is this: that a lot of people, they think that because they spend $10,000 on a video, they think that video is better. That's not true. That's not true. I know what, I've been around this for a while. You could spend 10 times more, 5 times more on a project, and you can get a worse result. That's a reality. There's incompetent people out there. So whoever's managing that scenario, if they're not involved in the day to day of dealing with these people, then you're gonna have a problem. That's just reality.
Yeah.
So they spent $10,000 on shooting a video for this record, for the single, right? In the hopes of promoting the album, promoting you, the artist,
Yeah.
and you end up having to edit color touch. For those of you that don't know, color touching is a process of editing the video where you make it look like a mastered finished product in terms of the color and the general vibe of the video, right? So
Yeah.
you end up having they paid the money, you end up having to fix it. So I'm guessing the the record release, you waited 6 months for it, and it gets like a sloppy rollout. Yeah.
Super, super sloppy. And basically I decided, based on another gut feeling, I forget if it was the day after or like a couple of days after the release, I decided, nah, this ain't it. I can't put my future in these people's hands. It's not only my future, it's my family's future. All the people that bet on me, because I bet on myself first. Like, I'm letting these people down.
Did
if
you
I don't.
did you notice an energy change, or like did you notice anything that would signal to you that the management on this side just lost interest in the project?
So when I was first offered the situation, the deal, there were 5 artists. 5 artists. Once I signed, a couple weeks later, there was 2 more artists. Then there was 3 more artists. Then there was 4 more artists. It became a revolving door.
I understand.
And suddenly I realized, like, oh shit, I came in thinking it was a 5-man team, artist roster. And they were thinking of throwing spaghetti at the wall to figure out which one is going to stick.
Yeah, they're thinking frequency as well, just a different type of frequency.
Because what happens is that the industry will take a bunch of shit that's relatively low cost to see if it'll pop. Yeah. And then with the thing that pops, they make their initial investment on the shit that failed back 10 times over.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? So like, it don't even matter to them. So the label, basically the major label partner, Island Records, somebody like them will give money to the JV almost like as an angel investor. Be like, hey, here's an initial investment, whether it works out or not, like it's all good. You know what I mean? But you have a good ear, right? You're a good filter. So we know that you're bringing us shit that has the potential to go, right?
Yeah.
So that's how it works. And so, which is why most artists that you see are not just under Universal Music Group. They're like Love Renaissance and Interscope,
right.
like a, Black or, West Side Boogie, like Love Renaissance, Interscope, so
multi-label deal.
Exactly.
Because there's partners involved.
Levels. So that's why Meek Mill is what is it, Rich Forever or MMG / whatever, you know what I'm saying? So that's how it works. So basically I realized that this shit became a revolving door and suddenly I didn't matter. And so I'm not going to put the next 7 years of my life and my craft and my journey in that shit, whatever that is, right? So that's when I started to plan my exit. And once I saw the release came out, it was so sloppy. I was like, you know what? Nah, this ain't it. So boom, 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 call my lawyer. Everything's a go. I write this long ass email basically detailing all the shit that I went through and observed, because I'm an observer. All the shit that I realized from the beginning of my deal to 12 months later. And I tagged in the email the major label partner, which apparently had no idea that these people were running a shit show. They were super fucking pissed because suddenly their shit show was aired out.
Sure.
And basically I kind of had to fight with them to be able to even release music again. Which is something that a lot of people don't realize. When people get into a bad situation, you can't just go to like release some music again. You're under contract exclusively to XYZ.
Right.
So unless you study up and realize where you can get in and get out, like you're stuck. And here's where my gut again, the circumambulation by Carl Jung, when I had to like realize that I didn't fit in with these people, I just had to focus on me. When I did that, it was on the gut feeling that I knew that that was a sinking ship. I'm the first person to leave the label of all those artists, and people are making up rumors about me and shit, talking shit behind my back at the label and all this shit. A couple months later, the label dissolves. All the artists get let go.
Crazy.
I'm the only one that went away, that walked away at the right time because I fucking knew. You know what I'm saying? I just fucking knew shit was going downhill. Next thing I know, a couple months later, I'm hearing whispers. Then I run into some people that were there and they're like, yo, the whole shit went under.
It's crazy.
Yeah. I'm talking about like up to like 3 weeks ago, I got a phone call from an artist that was like, yo, I'm still stuck. Like they can't do anything.
So your contractual obligation, it doesn't allow you to release music because technically you're under contractual obligation to the label. You signed a deal.
For some people, yeah.
It's crazy. And how long depends on their deal.
Thank God, I was me and my brother were reading books about music business. We were fucking calling our lawyer, asking a ton of fucking questions. When we negotiated initially, thank God we negotiated the things that we did because, it gave us some wiggle room.
Sure.
And lo and behold, that was kind of our saving grace, you know. And so a lot of records that I was working on, I ended up releasing myself and got back into the swing of releasing a record every week, more or less. But I realized a lot of shit, man. And I walked away from that a stronger artist. It took me, I got to comment on this because, man, I'm one of those people that I'm very hesitant to give depression a legitimate disease kind of label because I'm not downplaying it at all. I'm not saying it's not a real thing, and I'm not disregarding the people that actually deal with this. But for me personally, I'm very hesitant about the kind of power that I give the term and label depression. I'm not that kind of person. So, but what I will say is that after this whole shit happened, bro, like my whole journey like felt like a waste because I just wasted a year of my life when I felt like I was at the peak of my momentum. You know what I mean? I went into at the peak of my momentum and came out like nothing, like I didn't do anything. And that shit hurt me, man.
Well, I can't say that. I mean, I can't speak for you, bro. That the way you feel is the way you feel. But looking at it from the outside perspective, I can't say that it's a total loss because you learn so much more about the contract side of things, the business.
Everything I know about the business
is because of that.
Period.
Sure. So
I saw the inside. I saw how the machine works.
Yeah. So there's marketing, there's distribution, there's all kinds of things that you would not have. You wouldn't have access to if you weren't involved in that situation.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a question. You know, there's gonna be people watching this right now, and they're thinking about becoming an artist, and they're thinking about moving to California. Or they're thinking about moving to New York. What advice would you have for somebody like that is at that point in their life? You know, what would you say to them?
Two things. The first thing is I spoke to Lionel Richie a couple days ago because he comes into my job a lot, and I asked him, like, you know, Mr. Richie, you know, what kind of advice would you have for a young man, you know, chasing his dream in music? So he was like ownership, basically. Ownership. He says right now, more importantly than ever, the music industry is about to undergo a huge dramatic shift soon, very soon. And you need to be fighting to be an owner. and it resonated with everything that I had came to conclude in my journey, which was that if you're not an owner, you're not in the game, not in the future of the game, at least, So,
how do you develop ownership in such a complicated industry
I'm
like
gonna put
distribution?
it to you like this: there's only two things. You're either doing good or you're doing bad, and the people that you think are doing good, you don't really know. You don't really know what these people are going through, because $50,000 ain't shit.
Right.
$100,000 ain't shit. Once it's taxed, once you pay so and so and your lawyer and everything, that $100,000 is nothing.
Right.
It's like you make more money working at fucking Ralph Lauren. You
Right.
know what I'm saying? And you can't work with anybody else. You can't appear in a movie without permission. You can't do an ad without permission. Can't do shit.
You're locked
So
in.
like, you're locked in.
Right.
So these people are living on debt. You know what I'm saying? And they're going from one debt to another debt, because once their one deal ends, they go to another, get another advance, and end up in debt again. Then they go to another one. I don't even know how people get away with this shit. But ultimately, people leverage the other things that come with the music, and they end up giving away their ownership of the music.
Yeah.
But at what cost? At not being able to be an owner to where you could pass something on to your kids. And that, to me, is the most selfish thing that you could fucking do, because it's like, bro, you broke the cycle to give it away, like to throw away the key for the next man.
Yeah.
In your own lineage. You know what I mean? So like, that shit don't make any sense.
So what advice would you give to somebody looking to get into the record industry?
My advice is that you don't need to be in LA. Right now, the only thing keeping me in LA is that that's not only my decision to make, because my partner, my girlfriend, my love, she also has a life.
Sure.
And she's excelling in LA. She's doing great things. She's doing big things. So I can't make that decision for the both of us. And at the same time, there's nothing in Jersey for me right now. So like, I kind of like I don't have any place to go. So like, I might as well just continue to grind here. And there is the added benefit of meeting people and stuff like that. But I'm no longer in that business of, if I just talk to Kanye and like he hears a song, like I'm no longer in that frame of mind. So it doesn't even matter. I meet people every day, and I don't even mention that I make music, because that's just not the game. The game is, even if you're in Nebraska, fucking Idaho, or fucking Alaska, make your music, understand who you're making it for, and put it out there, and don't be attached to the end result.
Yeah.
Because when you're striving, the only thing you see is that end result, and you miss all the other things that could be the break.
So you really feel like being an independent artist is really the angle to go to this day and age?
It's the future.
Yeah.
It's the future, the way that, being a boutique clothing store is the future.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying? Like, you got people like Cap Swag, which, I don't mean to say boutique in a way that makes it seem small, because it's not, but it's like, you're grassroots. Yeah. You're like from the bottom.
I appreciate that, bro.
You are going to survive anything that comes in this economy. Like, I called you and you're telling me like, yo, I'm blessed. Like, my business grew.
Yeah.
In a time where everybody's business is going under. You get what I'm saying? Like, it don't matter what the fuck comes next. You're going to survive, because you're small compared to the giants. You're nimble. You understand how everything works, kind of like how I understand every aspect of my business and craft. You understand every aspect of your business and craft. So you know what to do, where you can cut. You don't have bullshit jobs in between and like all this other extra shit. So being an independent artist means you're in control of navigating and responding to whatever happens
what the market does. Yeah.
Society.
Yeah.
You're not waiting for a fucking 200-foot yacht to make a hard U-turn because there's an ice glacier.
Yeah.
In front of them.
You're a jet ski. You can move.
Yeah, you're a jet
ski. You can shift if you see something.
Yeah. And plus, the thing about being an independent artist is that you can leverage things that as a result of the content become a source of income, you can leverage those things and have the content as a source of income. Versus major artists, they can't leverage their music because their music is not owned by them.
Yeah.
Being milked by the system. So they have to depend on these club appearances. They have to depend on these fucking festivals. They can't leverage, they have to make a clothing line. They have to do all this other shit because they can't even depend on the music. And the music is the one thing that is like real estate that's supposed to feed your kids for generations.
That's their core. That's their art. That's who they are. And it's signed away. So let me ask you this question here. Why would somebody sign with a label at this point?
Well, that's what Jay-Z said in 444. He said, y'all still taking advances? Y'all still taking advances. What does that mean? Like, y'all still taking loans?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, that's what it is. It's a loan. And not only is it a loan, but they got you by the neck because the very thing that you work so hard to build up is not even yours anymore.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? So like, being an independent artist is no doubt fucking hard, but it's also hard to be in the room and realize that the room is the fucking cell.
That's crazy. The room is the cell. So you're out here striving for like 13 years to take yourself into a cell. That's crazy.
Yeah,
so
crazy, bro.
Let me ask you this. So you put that time in, you put that year in. Was there anything in that year that brought you a lot of value in terms of distribution of content, right? Because now you're on your own, you're an independent, right? Yeah. So you're moving, you're doing your own thing, and me and you talk a lot about business, and you have your eyes open to a lot more things than you used to. So in terms of content distribution, what did you walk away with as lessons learned?
One thing I learned is that labels don't know what the fuck to do any more than you do as an independent artist. What labels have is capital. With capital, you can put anything in front of most people. And that's what they do. Literally, we were sitting at a fucking round table, well, a conference table, a long one, coming up with ideas. And I'm over here racking my brain like I would be in my room by myself.
Yeah.
These motherfuckers like been in the room with the biggest fucking names.
Yeah.
They don't know what the fuck they're doing any more than you do. They just have the ability
to put capital behind it.
To put capital behind it. But I realized like, wow, like they don't know what they're doing. And that's why they failed. They didn't make anybody blow up. Plus, think about the music industry like this. This is how, for any artist, why do you think they're not picking up artists that don't have traction? Because they don't know what the fuck to do to get the traction. They're only picking up machines that are already in motion because you did the hard work of getting in motion.
Sure.
And then on top of that, everybody is in the business of keeping their job. So the last fucking thing on earth that they're going to do, no matter how fire your music is take a chance on you, because then that means they're taking a chance on their rent not getting paid in LA, one of the most expensive cities to live in the world.
Yeah. It's crazy.
So that's the business. Nobody's taking chances. Everybody's playing it safe. And when everybody's playing it safe, that means more of the same. That means they're not signing the next Drake. They're signing the next copy. They're signing the next fucking lookalike, the next cover artist. They're not signing the next new thing. The next new thing is coming from the guy in the bedroom that just puts it out, and the people make him the champion or her.
Sure. So you set up, you talked about ownership. How are you going to get ownership in what it is that you're doing moving forward? Obviously, you're an independent artist. You have ownership of whatever you're doing. But what is ownership to you? What does that word mean to you?
Yeah. So real quick, I'm going to answer that. And I'm also going to say that the only reason people are signing deals today is because they don't know what that comes with. And they think that notoriety means dollars. And they think that notoriety comes attached to the contract. It definitely doesn't. Do you know how many people are signed in California? Finding a signed artist to a major record label in California is like finding a gas station in any town. It's everywhere. And then you ask yourself, wow, how come I've never heard of your music? You're signed with Republic? Oh, you're signed with Warner? Oh, you've been writing for this. But how come you're not touring? How come you're not selling albums? How come you're not selling merch? Because just because you got a deal doesn't mean shit changes. Right. It makes things harder, you know? So ownership to me means this. Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, talks about assets and liabilities. An asset, by definition, not by the financial world's definition, but by true definition, is something that puts money in your pocket, while a liability is something that takes money out of your pocket. If I make a song tonight and that song goes on to make $35 over the course of the next 6 months, but I also make 42 other songs that make $10 here, $5 there, $20 here, $15 there, I could have $1,000 a month in positive cash flow. That's my rent. You know what I'm saying? Like, as an owner, you know, it's like you don't invest into a stock and like expect it to make you $20,000 in the next 2 months. You build up over time. So what you do is you build a catalog, and the ownership of that catalog creates a yield that will hopefully be a positive yield over the course of years that will feed you and your family forever. So even if that catalog produces $5,000 a month over the journey of 20 years or something like that, I mean, $5,000 a month off of just one single income stream that's
a lot of money.
Yeah. When you're not even factoring in all the other things like shows, merchandise, which
you get to keep all of.
Yeah.
You don't get to
other assets like lessons, you know, things that you can do. These are all things that I'm moving into and that I've taken a lot of time to educate myself on so that I could better understand what it really does mean to be an owner.
Right.
And why independent is the way to go for me. So think about it in terms of that. Do you need to reach 1 million people? No.
You
need 1,000 people that will spend $100 a year on your product, your music, in the form of a $45 hoodie, a $10 album, and a $25 show ticket, and a $30 fucking merchandise kit. $100, one fan, 1,000 of them. That's $100,000 a year.
Yeah. So
that's what being an owner means.
Let people know how they can support your craft. How can they support you as an artist right now?
So people can support me by paying for the things that I offer, you know? So whether it's music, you know, streaming is not enough, to be honest. Buy an album, $10, you know, tell your friend to buy an album, that's $20. Put a friend on and tell them to check out the merchandise on the website.
So we're gonna drop a link in the description for Kev, so that you can check out his merchandise. You can check out some of his music. I think, you know, for me, there's some valuable lessons here, bro. In terms of contractual obligations for the artists, there's a lot of valuable lessons here. I think one of the most valuable lessons I know of is, you know, you follow your dreams, bro. You can never be wrong by doing that. Nobody can judge anybody for the decisions that they make with their life. They're their life, right? The other aspect of a valuable lesson that I take away from this is, I mean, I've known this for a very long time. Ownership is key. And whatever you do in life, if you're going to do it, find a way to boss up, right? So if it's creating content, if it's getting involved in a business and carving yourself, your niche within that business. I mean, listen, we talk a lot about entrepreneurial strive and building yourself, right? That's not always great for some people. If you work for a company, you can boss up. The way you can boss up with a company is you carve a niche within that company and say, listen, I'm the greatest at this.
Yeah.
Right? You find a way to position yourself where you get some equity. You find a way to position yourself where you're getting
That's something that I learned from you. Yeah, I didn't know that was even possible.
Of course it's possible, bro. Of course it's possible. You know, you can ask Phil that. Right? So like, if somebody brings value to the I mean, sometimes people, you know, that you have to bring the right kind of value to the table. You know, you have to, and sometimes that's a gamble. A lot of owners won't do that with the right, you know, with the person unless they feel like they're buying something of value, because then they're caught in a situation that they don't want to be involved in. Right? That's the truth. So if you're an owner and you see that somebody brings a great amount of value to the table, you're able to leverage that into a relationship. Ownership is not always, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to start a business on my own. That does not work for everybody. That works for some people. That's not something that everybody can do. Corporations are called cooperations for a reason, right?
Yeah.
The guy who owns Universal doesn't own the whole thing, right? Like, there's not a singular owner of Universal. They're shareholders. Those shareholders contribute and they hire people to do those jobs. That's what ownership is. That's what equity is. That's what stock is. So I feel like that's probably one of the most important lessons you can learn in the music industry, outside the music industry. Bossing up is bossing up. You know, like, people are selling rap snacks now.
Yeah.
Like, they're selling fucking noodles and shit. Like, they're out there. You know, this is smart. You know, this is, instead of giving it to Cup of Noodle, you know, who owns that? Master P? Is that who owns that? Rap Snacks?
I'm not sure, but I know it's somebody's.
Bro, they're bossing up. They're bossing up. Ownership. Take a position. Invest your money. Ownership too. Here's one other thing that I want to say about ownership before we wrap this up. Ownership is, you have to be willing to risk your money or your time. If you're not willing to risk your money or your time, then nobody's gonna take a chance on you. If you want to be an owner for free, you're in the wrong business. You got to put something in. You either have to have the cash or you have to put the sweat equity in. If you're not willing to do both, you're a liability, and nobody's giving you anything for that. Straight up.
Yeah, man.
So with that being said, I want to wrap this up.
Sure.
I want to thank Kev Decor, good friend of mine. He's really instrumental. I mean, when you make contacts throughout your life, you begin to see what people's values are, what their value is. Kevin is an amazing artist. He's going to continue to be an amazing artist. He's got an amazing eye for content. Look out for future content coming out from him, and look out for a few collabo projects that we're working on together. So thank you for watching. Tune in to episode 3 coming soon. Thank you, Kevin, for being on there.
Thank you, man. It's been an honor.
Appreciate that.
For having me, Mohammed. I really fuck with Cap Swag and your whole movement.
Thank you, man.
I look at it as an empire. I respect it.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that.
You put me on to Rich Dad, Poor Dad. We hadn't talked in a while. I finished it. It should change my fucking whole perspective on finances. I called you. We reconnected. And I'm glad we did, because I realized that I need people in my corner that have done shit. And you're one of those people.
I appreciate that.
There's not many people that I can call and say, yo, I know somebody. I know a business person. I know somebody who's been through this, who's done that, and really do what the fuck they talk about. So thank you for having me. My website is being updated right now, but you can expect to find it at kevdecor.com. I'm working on a new album. I got a lot of great projects coming. If you don't see anything new, be patient. It's definitely coming before the year is up. So, you know, it's going to be a great fucking journey. And I look forward to the podcast and the future episodes. They're going to be crazy.
You guys are watching the Hustle Man Show. Make sure you like, subscribe. Link below for Kev Decor. Link below for Spotify and audio experience. Thanks for watching. And remember, business is always personal.
Oh.